What is going on, guys? Really here with another brand new video, and with this video I really want to talk about who Israel Adesanya is going to face next at the middleweight division. He is coming back down after he wasn't triumphant against Jan Blachowicz to try to get that 205-pound strap. Now he's coming back to 185 pounds to protect his crown, to protect his gold, to protect this title that he holds, that he still has. And there is a little bit of a dilemma. Who is going to be the next opponent for Israel Adesanya? Is it going to be Robert Whittaker, or is it going to be Marvin Vettori? Those two individuals have put the most work in over anybody else in that whole entire 185-pound division, and both those guys are primed for a title shot. Both those guys have faced Izzy. Both those guys have lost them before in the past. Obviously, Marvin Vettori had more success against Israel Adesanya, even though that was Israel Adesanya's second fight in the UFC, and he was still very much green in the sport of mixed martial arts as a whole. So obviously there's a lot of things that have to go down, and the person that did have more success against Israel Adesanya was Marvin Vettori. He was able to get him down a couple of times. He didn't do anything with those takedowns, no shots at all, which is why he lost via split decision. Robert Whittaker was trying to go off of Kelvin Gastelum's game plan against Israel Adesanya when he was defending his crown, his gold strap, the 185-pound middleweight championship of the world, but he fell victim to the power and the technicality of Israel Adesanya in the second round when he got knocked out. He was knocked down at the very end of that first round. He was hurt, he didn't fully recover, and then he was finished in that second round. And you got to do the math. Obviously, Marvin Vettori went the full 3 rounds. Robert Whittaker was barely able to get out of the first round, then finished in the second round. Both these fighters have improved tremendously since they faced Israel Adesanya. If Israel Adesanya were to choose one of these opponents, I believe he'd like to choose Marvin Vettori over Robert Whittaker because he was able to finish Robert Whittaker pretty darn fast, and he does have a little bit more history left with Marvin Vettori. Marvin claims that whenever Israel Adesanya talks about him, he always calls him the Italian guy. He's too afraid to say his name. He's too afraid to even call him out again, and he doesn't want to even fight him. I think that's a little bit ludicrous. I think that's a little bit crazy right there, but I want to see Marvin Vettori face Israel Adesanya again, just because that fight went to a split decision, and I believe that Marvin Vettori has become a new mixed martial artist. So has Israel Adesanya. Both these guys have improved, have developed so much since that fight went down a couple years ago, and I believe that it would end very, very differently this time. I don't think it's going to be a split decision win for either of these fighters. I think someone is going to finish someone else in this fight, and Marvin Vettori is most likely going to go in there with the wrestling because he's definitely not going to want to be outstriked against Israel Adesanya like he was in the first fight. Even though he was moving his head a lot, he was kind of like one of those bobbleheads, kind of moving around like that with his head movement, which is pretty funny, but it still worked for him nonetheless. Israel Adesanya, like I said, he loves to put these guys out. He destroyed Paulo Costa, and Paulo Costa was deemed the guy to beat Israel Adesanya, the guy to take Israel Adesanya's O from his record, and it didn't happen. Israel Adesanya was able to get him out there extremely fast, and now he's back at 185 pounds, either Robert Whittaker or Marvin Vettori. Obviously, I want Marvin Vettori to take that fight. I want Israel Adesanya to fight him again and possibly finish him off. That way he can be able to shush the critics and say, look, I finished this guy the second time around. It wasn't even a close fight. Marvin Vettori can be able to back up his words and say, look, I've taken this strap from Israel Adesanya. I'm the new baddest man in the planet at 185 pounds. If you want to give another rematch, do a trilogy fight, I'll beat him there as well. There's so many different stories coming all together. And Robert Whittaker was offered, I believe he was offered a fight against Israel Adesanya a while back for that rematch, but he wasn't ready. He said he didn't really want the belt next for his next fight. He wanted to keep on improving, and I absolutely respect him for him because a lot of people would take the fight, a lot of people would jump the gun and face Israel Adesanya right off the bat, not being as prepared as they want to, but Robert Whittaker is on a 3-fight winning streak. The guy got Darren Till out of there, he got Jared Cannonier out of there, and then he got a very game Kelvin Gastelum out of there as well. And Kelvin came up there, and basically that fight was an absolute war. Absolutely loved it. It was a battle of attrition, and Robert Whittaker was able to come out on top. Robert Whittaker has the better resume on paper against Marvin Vettori, but we're going to have to see how the UFC goes with this. I believe the UFC is going to go with Marvin just because he was the fighter that almost beat Israel Adesanya before Jan Blachowicz did, and he did take him to a split decision, and that was very early in Israel Adesanya's UFC career. It was his second fight overall, and we're going to have to see what happens. I think this is a very interesting situation. My heart wants Robert Whittaker to take that title fight next, but logic goes to Marvin Vettori, so we're going to have to see what happens there. It's a very, very interesting situation. It's basically that whole kind of like that love triangle thing. Izzy's at the top, then you got Marvin and Robert Whittaker on the bottom, kind of forming this triangle. Who's going to get there first? Who's going to get to the top? Then you also got Darren Till, that's always in the wings as well. UFC could always say, screw these guys and go with Darren Till. They've done it in the past. So we're going to have to see what happens because his UFC middleweight division is very, very interesting right now. There's a lot of movement going on right now with the whole entire division. Fights are basically being booked to left and right. And we're going to have to see who Israel Adesanya fights next. I believe he's definitely going to have a huge say in it, but I believe it's going to be Marvin Vettori. I believe they're going to make that fight go down maybe, I believe, September. Probably September. I know that Jan Blachowicz versus Glover Teixeira is going to be going down in September, so why not book that fight on that main card as well? But like I said, we'll see what happens. UFC definitely has a lot of work on their hands, a lot of fights coming up, and that fight is definitely going to be an interesting one, whether it is Robert Whittaker or Marvin Vettori. But what do you guys think? Who's going to be the next individual, the next fighter to fight Israel Adesanya for his gold strap? Let me know in the comment sections. Let me know if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, if you think I'm absolutely crazy, you don't know anything about MMA, I'll take that too. Like I said, I like comments, I like debates. I want debate with you guys because at the end of the day, it's the comment section. You guys have the power to say whatever you want. I don't really, it doesn't really affect me either way, but, I love it when the MMA community gets a little bit rowdy and starts going at it and everything like that with the comments. I appreciate you guys watching this video, as always. Very interesting situation we got here, the 185-pound middleweight division. Israel Adesanya coming back. Who he's going to fight next? I have no idea. I'm going with Marvin, but it could always be a different individual. Stay blessed, guys. Stay safe. I'll see you soon. Later.